guest. And I just want to go ahead and say this. Our leadoff hitter on the show today, here on The Drive, Chris Lowe, talk about a guy that knows his stuff when it comes to college football. Tennessee Volunteers, doesn't matter what we're talking about. He's a killer at what he does.
Oh, absolutely, and we're glad to have Chris. And thanks, Chris. We appreciate you coming on the air with us today, man. And how's everything in your neck of the woods, man?
It's great. It's good to be with you guys. It's always good to be on the air there in Cleveland, home of the first family of Cleveland, the Witt family. I just want to give a shout-out.
There you go. There you go. So we've got a little notoriety here for sure. All right, Chris, got to get this right off the bat. You've been covering college football for many, many years, and you've seen your fair share of amazing things in college football. Where does Indiana winning the national championship in football rank as? I didn't see that happening in your career.
Right up there at the top. I mean, I don't think anybody saw it coming. And maybe we should have, because they were a pretty solid football team last year. But I think people were like, all right, let's rub our eyes and make sure that what we saw was legit. And they come back this year and are even better. And I think when you study a little bit closer and see all the players they brought in, the experienced players, what a good job their scouting and personnel department did. And then they brought in the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. Quarterback's the most important position in all of sports. And Mendoza was lights out for them this year. And I think the thing we probably now in this era of football have to give a little bit more credence to is evaluation. And from Kirk Cignetti all the way down through his staff, their evaluations were spot on. And the players they brought in, the positions that they targeted, and I think probably most importantly, guys that were good in the locker room, guys that were part of what they wanted to do, bought in completely. And when you look at the draft this year and next year, I think you're going to see a lot of those guys going. And maybe they weren't 4 and 5 stars when they came in, but they leave that program as really good football players, and probably will end up having more pro players than any of us would have guessed, back in August.
Once again, we're joined by Chris Lowe, senior insider for On3 and Rivals, an SEC expert. And Chris, we're going to throw some college football questions at you, but if you could, and I'm sure we've got a lot of listeners that are very familiar with your work with Rocky Top Insider. A lot of Tennessee fans here in our market. Just kind of talk about what you guys do there with Rocky Top Insider. I know I've enjoyed kind of following everything with Josh Elander, the new head baseball coach at Tennessee that you guys have covered and talked about. Just kind of fill our listeners in on Rocky Top Insider if you could.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of fun doing some work with RTI, Bob Baskerville. One of the owners, we talked this summer about doing a show on Sunday night that would run through Rocky Top Insider, and we do it every Sunday. Usually it's a podcast, drops around 8 o'clock, the RTI Lowdown, and Bob is the co-host of that show, and it's really almost exclusively dedicated to Tennessee athletics, and which is nice for me because what I do for On3 is pretty much all national. It's nice living in Tennessee as I have now for 20-plus years to dive into Sunday night to UT. And, we've had a ton of different people on. You mentioned Josh Elander was kind enough to join us last Sunday and sort of preview the new look balls in baseball. They start, hard to believe they're going to start here in about 2.5 weeks. And it's just fun to catch up with a lot of former players. We've had Kevin Burnett, Casey Clausen, and Chris Lofton, and Ron Slay, and a little bit of everybody. And I think that's something we're going to continue as we go forward through the basketball season and probably through spring football.
So, Chris, heading back to college football, last year we thought we all had it nailed when everybody was saying Texas, Penn State, Clemson, some of the top teams in the country, and I feel like a lot of us whiffed on those. If you had to guess right now, who are some of the top programs that towards the end of the year, once the selection committee is selecting those seeds, that will be up there for next year's college football season?
Well, I still think Texas has as much talent as anybody. They're bringing back, Arch, and this will be his second full season as a starter. I fully expect him to be a lot better, a lot more consistent. And then they really work the transfer portal. When you look at what they went and did in the transfer portal, they bring in Cam Coleman from Auburn, who I think has as much ability at receiver as anybody in the country. They've got Gooseby back at left tackle, one of the best left tackles in the country. They brought in the Biles kid from Pittsburgh at middle linebacker. And then they bring some other guys back. Ryan Niblett, one of the top return guys in the country. I think he'll make a bigger splash at running back. So, it's hard for me to see a scenario where Texas is not in the playoff this coming year, barring injuries. I think they're going to be right up there. I think Indiana will be very good again. They're retaining, bringing in Hoover at quarterback from TCU. I think in the SEC, you never want to say the Georgias and the Alabamas and LSUs of the world ever have a bridge year. I thought this was sort of a bridge year for Kirby Smart at Georgia, and they still got to the playoff, and they didn't win. I think next year will be the best team and most talented team he's had probably since that 23 season. When they didn't get to the playoff, remember, they won 29 in a row and got beat by Alabama in the SEC championship game. But during a 4-team format, they got squeezed and didn't get in, which probably was one of his better teams. I think this team, with a lot of the guys he's recruited and the way they develop players here in Athens, especially with Gunnar Stockton coming back. I mean, he's as tough a kid as there is in football. I think Georgia next year has a chance to be as good as they've been under Kirby since those national championship teams.
Chris, let me ask you this. Parity's pretty – I think most people agree that parity has arrived in college football. We always have the blue bloods that we've always expected to be there. And let me ask you this. What traditional power teams, maybe for the last 10 years, some of the blue bloods from like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, maybe Michigan, Florida, USC, LSU, Notre Dame, those type of teams, who do you believe will have the most difficult time in this new world of college football with the NIL and all this? Do you think any of these traditional programs over the last 10 years will have a more difficult time than some of the others?
Well, I mean, this year tells us that Clemson would probably be there at the top of the list. And, it's not like they have fallen off the face of the earth. They did win a bunch of ACC titles since that 2015 to 19 run when they were either a national champion or played in the championship game every year. But Dabo Swinney just does not believe in, and he's done more this year as far as dipping into the portal, but he doesn't believe really in building his roster through the portal. So we'll see how much he adapts. But they were a bad football team this year. And when I look at the talent on that team, there's no reason they should have been. So my question is, how do they bounce back? Do they bounce back? They're going to have a brand new quarterback. So I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on Dabo Swinney and Clemson to see in this era of football, as you point out, if they can get back. I think Alabama next year it's going to be a fascinating case study. DeBoer will be in his third year. They were a good football team this year. They started poorly, obviously, but they caught fire there in the middle of the season, played really good football, got to the playoff, got to the SEC championship game, did not play well. Georgia beat them badly. And I give them credit. They came from behind on the road, beat Oklahoma, but then Indiana just absolutely boat raced them. Yeah. But Indiana did that to a lot of teams. So my question is, they're going to have a first-year quarterback with Ty Simpson leaving. And when you look at the portal, they didn't really cash in the portal. So where have they gotten better being able to run the football? And they just hired a brand-new offensive line coach. But when you look at the running back stable, the offensive line, they're losing a lot of guys up there. That, to me, is what's got to improve. If Bama's going to get back to being Bama, they've got to be able to run the football again and do so effectively. And they were 125th nationally this year. So they're a team that I watch closely next year, too, to see, if they can improve and do some of the things that they didn't do this year.
Again, we're joined by Chris Lowe here on The Drive, senior insider for On3 Rivals. Chris, a perfect segue. You were talking about Clemson and Dabo Swinney. One thing that I enjoy is following you on X, on social media. You guys can follow Chris at CLowFB. And you had kind of shared some things on the current tampering issues that are going on between Ole Miss and Clemson. If you could just kind of give us your take on that, because it's absolutely rampant across college football right now, college athletics in general. And it sounds like, from what I've read, from what you've shared, that the only solution is to do what Dabo did and start calling people out.
Yeah, and I think given specifics, and you just don't see that in college football. You don't see a coach stand up and say, all right, this is what happened. These are specific examples. This kid, this coach, this day, this is what they told him. This is what his agent told us. And again, whether you abhor Dabo or you love him, I mean, that's something that we just haven't seen. And clearly, he's ready to step up and put it all out there. Now, if you're going to do that, you better make sure your closet's clean, right? You don't have any skeletons in your closet. And we'll see what comes of it. Because clearly what he's doing is he said, okay, I'm handing you this on a silver platter, NCAA. Let's see if you truly have any teeth, to be able to punish. Now, these are allegations. Okay, he said, he's got all these notes he was reading from. We haven't heard from Ole Miss yet, in fairness. But I'll also say this, in having done this for as long as I have and talking to all the coaches, there's degrees of tampering out there everywhere. Okay, now it's like speeding. A lot of us speed. I'm guilty of speeding. But are we doing 101 and a 60? Are we doing 81 and a 70? I mean, conversations are being had all the time with collectives and coaches and agents of players. I think the other thing to remember now, all these players have agents. Now, what Dabo alleged was that Pete Golding contacted this kid in class, and so that if that is true,
a kid who was not in the portal.
Right, yeah, right. That's about as egregious as it gets, if it's true, okay, if that all is true. But what I sort of get frustrated with is everyone's pointing the finger of everybody else, coaches, ADs, well, everybody's cheating but us. Or I should say everybody's tampering but us. Well, as one AD I've known for a long time told me just recently, he said there's sort of two truisms as we sort of are in this age now, the portal, NIL. He said everybody's tampering and everybody's being tampered with. And I think that's probably the best way to explain what's going on right now. The question everybody has is, will the NCAA do anything about it? Can they do anything about it? Or is this sort of a point where we see everything move away from the NCAA and maybe the top teams in football, and especially in football, break away from the NCAA, do their own thing, their own rules, their own governance, their own NIL. Maybe you go to sort of a collective bargaining model, similar to what the NFL has. But I do think it's going to be one or the other. I don't think there's any way we can sort of sit here in the gray anymore and have it be as chaotic as it's been and not have something happen. Now, listen, I'm not one of those get off my lawn type guys. I love football on Saturdays. The product is as good as it's ever been. And I know you guys probably on your show hear this. Well, I'm losing interest. I'm not going to watch games anymore. Well, look at the TV ratings. Look at how many people are going to games. The interest is really not declining in college football. It's going up. And I just hope, though, we don't get to a point where the leadership or lack of leadership off the field does start to damage the product on the field on Saturdays.
Chris, last thing I've got for you before I kick it back over to Jim is kind of speaking to our Tennessee football fans. Jim Knowles coming in, new defensive coordinator for the Vols. All the additions that they have made via the portal, what can we expect from Josh Heupel's Tennessee Vols on the gridiron next season?
Well, the first thing is there's a lot of new faces. You mentioned Jim Knowles, but bringing in Owings from Indiana, I think was a big coup for Josh Heupel, the strength coach, because you look around at teams that are doing well and teams that are playing and winning championships. The strength department is really about as important as anything, because you think about coordinators, you think about head coach. Well, the strength staff is with those kids across the year more than anybody. And that's sort of where you build, in a lot of ways, you build your culture in the weight room, in the strength and conditioning program. And I think Tennessee, what to expect. I think they need to get a little tougher. They need to be more physical in certain areas. They got to tackle better. But, to do all those things, you got to commit to it. You got to practice it. and I'm not saying Tennessee's soft. I know some people are going to come away with a lot of sin, and I'm not saying that. But I think when you look at the fact Josh Heupel was willing to go out this year, and he, for the first time since he's been at Tennessee, you really sort of had a staff upheaval on defense. And I think it's important to remember, too, that not only did he bring in Jim Knowles, he let Jim Knowles have his hires. I mean, to me, it's not fair to bring in a coordinator and not let that coordinator go and hire 2 or 3 guys on his staff that he believes in, feels like fits his system, can teach his system. Because Knowles' system is not the easiest to learn. I mean, he is really, really successful. You look at where he's been, and he's built defenses up from the ground everywhere. Oklahoma State did it. He did it at Ohio State. But it takes a while. I think having his guys, bringing his guys in with him, will help him teach it a little bit better. But no, I think Tennessee is – I know there was a lot of gnashing of the teeth this year, losing 5 games. Nobody wants that. But they just got to be more consistent. I think they got to tackle better on defense. And looks like they're going to have, unless Aguilar gets his waiver, I don't know how realistic that is. They're going to have a first-year starter at quarterback. The last thing I would add is Tennessee's not the only one in this boat. But remember, the league, SEC, goes to 9 league games next year. That's going to make the league even harder. And so some of these teams that were losing 2 games, maybe you're going to have 3 losses. And I think fans in general, ADs, fans, donors, might want to reprogram themselves a little bit, because there's going to be a lot of really good 3-loss, maybe even 4-loss football teams next year in the SEC.
Yep. Chris, how can our listeners follow you?
Well, you can catch me on Twitter, at CeeLoFB, and then On3.com is where you can get all my stuff. We had this week, our way too early All-America team. I think that ran on yesterday actually. And last Friday, I sort of capped the season, sort of my best and worst. Some of it tongue-in-cheek, some of it legit, about what was, the lowlights and highlights of the season. But you can always go to On3.com, and it's been awesome. A lot of great people. Shannon Terry, the owner, has built a great staff and a lot of really good people to work with. They also yesterday unveiled their composite recruiting classes, and I want to say Tennessee was 7th or 8th, which, again, I think when you look at, to me, people say, well, how healthy is a program? Well, you better still recruit well. I understand the portal is important. You better not miss a lot in the portal, but you still, to me, have to build the foundation of your program with really good high school players and then develop them and keep them. Retention is just as important.
Yeah, that's for sure. You got to recruit a team all year long. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot, man. We appreciate it.
Okay, guys, take care.
Thanks a lot. Chris Lowe from On3. He was with ESPN so long. It's so
Many
hard
years,
for,
yeah.
so hard for me to not say Chris Lowe from ESPN.
Yeah, for 20 years.
Yeah, so a couple decades there, but he knows his stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and he really knows Tennessee athletics big time.
Yeah, I was really excited to kind of pick his brain. I know it seems like a no-brainer, the Jim Knowles hire, and obviously he mentioned the strength and conditioning coach.
Right.
Who talk about a hot hand, a guy coming from a national championship team, having a team full of 2 and 3 stars, win a title and play physical football the way they did. When you're, as Chris alluded to, when you're willing, as Josh Heupel, to make those kind of additions and hire, that is a sign to me as a fan. If you're a Tennessee fan, that is an investment in your program to address some needs, and boy, did they address them, and I'm really excited for what the Vols are going to do.
Yeah, it shows me that he's willing to adapt as well. To bring in a guy like that does have a difficult system, and to allow him to hire some people onto his staff, I think is huge. But really, the biggest thing that he said that I'm in complete agreement with is the strength and conditioning coach, in my opinion, is probably the second most important position outside of the head coach, because they're basically the head coach of the offseason.
Yeah, and you got to be big and strong and to make it through 12 teams, 12 game season and 9 league games.
I was about to say 9 league games. That's a big deal now.
Hey, if you think Chris was good, wait till you see who we get in about 10 minutes. Josh Pate. We're excited about getting him. We're going to get him on the air around 5:30. So excited to bring you 2 really, really good guests on today's show.
Yeah, which, by the way, it's Derek Owings who's the new strength and conditioning coach for the Tennessee Volunteers. Very excited. I know our Tennessee listeners out there are excited for the possible changes on the defensive side of the ball down in the trenches that he's going to bring. So, again, Chris Lowe, senior writer, insider for On3 and Rivals. Awesome having him on. And as you said, coming up in just a minute, got another big gun. We're pulling out the big guns here on the show today, which – with that, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, a lot more college football. We're going to talk some local stuff later on in the show as well. All that right here on ESPN Cleveland 101.3. This is The Drive.
The Drive will be back after a quick timeout.